The sun was a hammer, and the Texas prairie was the anvil. It was 1873, a bad year for peace. Running Wolf saw the smoke first, a thin black finger pointing at the sky accusingly. It wasn't Comanche smoke. It was the smoke of trouble. He pulled his horse to a stop, the wind whispering warnings in his ear. The scent wasn't just wood smoke. It was fear. He nudged his horse forward, moving from a canter to a silent, stalking walk. The closer he got, the louder the sounds became. Not the sounds of a family making a home. The sounds of a home being unmade. A woman's voice, stretched thin and about to snap. Running Wolf slid from his horse, becoming a shadow in the tall grass. He crept to the edge of a clearing, and his hand went to the knife at his belt. The cabin was already wounded, its door hanging by a single leather hinge. In the dirt, a woman with hair the color of a sunset knelt, her arms wrapped around a small boy. 3 men circled her. They weren't soldiers. They weren't cowboys. They were vultures. "Please," the woman begged, her voice a cracked whisper. "Take what you want. Just leave us be." The leader, a man with a beard full of dust and cruelty, let out a laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Oh, we'll take what we want, Mrs. Sullivan. And what we want is this land." He kicked at the dirt. "Your husband made a big mistake settling on Jackson's property." Her head snapped up. "This isn't Jackson's land." "It is now," the man sneered. Running Wolf's eyes narrowed. He'd seen men like this before. Men who followed no law but their own greed. But it was the child that held his gaze. A boy, maybe 5 winters old. His hair was black, straight as a spear shaft. His skin was darker than his mother's. His eyes. They were the eyes of the people. One of the other men spat on the ground. "That half-breed brat ain't gonna save you. Jackson wants this land cleared, all of it." The leader grabbed the woman's arm, hauling her to her feet. The boy cried out, a small, sharp sound of terror. "Time to go," the man said, his voice slick with false kindness. "We'll see you to town. Right after we burn this little shack to the ground." Something inside Running Wolf broke. The honor of the warrior. The spirit of his ancestors. He didn't think. He acted. He stepped out of the tall grass. And the world went silent. The 3 men froze. Their hands hovered over their pistols. One of them breathed a single word, a curse on the prairie. Comanche. Running Wolf's voice was low, calm, but it cut through the air like a thrown hatchet. He spoke their language, rough but clear. "This woman, this child, they are under my protection." He pointed a single finger back the way they came. "Go." The leader's fear was quickly turning to foolish bravery. He laughed, but it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Look here, savage. This is settler business. This is our land." Running Wolf took 1 step forward. Just 1. But it felt like the earth shifted. "No," he said, and the word was final. "This is Comanche land. You trespass. And now, you pay." The first shot was a thunderclap in the sudden quiet. But Running Wolf was no longer there. He moved like the wind he was named for, a blur of buckskin and fury. The bullet tore through the air where he had been standing. Before the man could fire again, Running Wolf was on him. His knife was a flash of silver sunlight, a cry of pain. The woman, Sarah, didn't hesitate. She grabbed her son, Benjamin, and shoved him behind a water trough. The fear in her eyes was now a cold, hard fire. From a hidden pocket in her skirt, she pulled a tiny pistol. A derringer. A widow's last defense. The fight was over almost before it began. It was a whirlwind of motion, brutal and efficient. When the dust settled, 2 of the men were on the ground, groaning and clutching their wounds. The leader, the one with the cruel laugh, was already a diminishing shape on the horizon, spurring his horse into a desperate gallop. Running Wolf stood over the fallen men, his breathing even, his eyes like chips of obsidian. He turned his gaze to the woman. She still had the derringer pointed at him. Her hand was shaking, but her aim was steady. She held her ground, a lioness protecting her cub. He slowly, deliberately, sheathed his knife. He raised his empty hands, palms forward. "I will not harm you," he said, his voice softer now. "But those men, they will be back." with more. She lowered the gun, just an inch. Her knuckles were white. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you help us?" His gaze shifted from her to the small boy peeking out from behind the trough. The boy wasn't crying anymore. He was watching Running Wolf with an expression of pure, unadulterated curiosity. "The boy," Running Wolf said. "The answer simple and absolute. He has the blood of the people." Sarah's face was a storm of emotions. Shock, fear, defensiveness, and then, finally, a weary resignation, as if a truth she had long hidden had finally been dragged into the light. His father was Kiowa. Kiowa, not Comanche. The two tribes were cousins, but not brothers. They shared the plains, but they did not always share peace. This changed things. This made the world more complicated. Running Wolf felt a knot tighten in his gut. This was not the simple act of protection he had thought it was. The boy, Benjamin, stepped out from behind his mother's skirts. He looked at Running Wolf, not with the fear of a white child seeing a Comanche warrior, but with something else. Recognition. And in that moment, Running Wolf knew this day was only the beginning. The land grabbers were a storm, but a bigger, darker storm was gathering on the horizon, and this woman and this Kiowa boy were standing right in its path. Sarah's shoulders sagged. The fight was gone from her, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "His father's name was Swift Arrow," she said softly. The words meant only for the wind. "He was killed 6 years ago." Running Wolf nodded. The name Swift Arrow was known. A great Kiowa warrior. His death had been a whisper on the plains, a story of a skirmish with buffalo hunters. "My first husband. Thomas," she corrected herself, her voice breaking. "Thomas was not Benjamin's father. He married me after. He loved Benjamin as his own. He was killed 3 months ago." Her story was a tapestry of loss, each thread pulled from her by the harshness of this land. Running Wolf looked again at the boy, and a memory, distant and sharp, pricked at his mind. Something about the boy's eyes, the set of his jaw. It was familiar. "You are not safe here," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Jackson's men will return. You must come with me." "To your camp?" Fear flared in her eyes again. The stories she'd heard, the campfire tales of Comanche raids, were a poison in her mind. "They'll kill us." "No," Running Wolf said with a certainty that surprised even himself. "Our chief, Gray Eagle, is a man of wisdom. He will see the truth. And my people, we honor those who protect children." He paused, studying her face. "What is your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Sullivan. And this is Benjamin." The sun bled across the horizon as Sarah made her choice. It wasn't really a choice at all. Behind her lay the smoldering ashes of one life. Ahead lay a path into the unknown, a path that led deep into the heart of what she had been taught to fear. She gathered what little she could carry, her hands moving with a numb efficiency. Running Wolf helped her and Benjamin onto his horse. As they rode away from the broken cabin, the little boy's hand reached out and rested on Running Wolf's leather tunic. It was a simple gesture, a child's touch. But in it, there was a weight of trust that settled heavy on the warrior's soul. He had not just saved a woman and a child. He had taken responsibility for them. And he had a cold feeling that the price for that responsibility had yet to be paid. The Comanche camp was a living thing, a sprawling collection of teepees breathing smoke into the twilight sky. As they rode in, a silence fell. Work stopped. Children's games ended. 100 pairs of eyes followed their approach, sharp and questioning. A white woman and a half-blood child, riding with one of their own. It was a sight that broke all the rules. Sarah clutched Benjamin, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Every story of captivity, of violence, screamed in her head. But Running Wolf's presence beside her was a steady, calming force. "Stay close," he murmured. "The chief's teepee is ahead." Their path was blocked by an old woman. Her face was a map of the plains, lined by sun and sorrow. She was Singing Bird, Running Wolf's mother. She spoke to him in their native tongue, her words sharp as flint. her gestures pointing accusingly at Sarah. Running Wolf answered calmly, his voice full of respect, but firm. The debate was fierce, but short. The old woman's hard expression began to soften, just a little. She stepped closer, her dark eyes locking onto Benjamin. "This is my mother," Running Wolf told Sarah. "She asks why I bring strangers into our camp." Sarah swallowed against the dryness in her throat. "What did you say?" "The truth," he said simply. "That you were in danger. That the boy has the blood of the people." Singing Bird reached out a weathered hand. Benjamin, to Sarah's astonishment, stepped forward without fear. The old woman's touch was surprisingly gentle as she tilted his face to the fading light. She murmured something soft. A question. Running Wolf translated. "She says the boy has the spirit of a warrior. She sees it in his eyes." Before Sarah could process this, a powerful voice cut across the camp. A tall, imposing man with streaks of gray in his braided hair strode towards them. He was flanked by 2 warriors, and his eagle feather headdress marked him as a man of great authority. This was Chief Gray Eagle. His gaze was piercing, moving from Running Wolf to Sarah, and finally resting on Benjamin. He spoke to Running Wolf in Comanche, his tone questioning but not angry. Running Wolf explained, his words painting a picture of the attack, of the men who called themselves Jacksons, of the courage of the woman and the spirit of the child. After an eternity, Gray Eagle nodded. He looked directly at Sarah and spoke in halting, difficult English. "Woman with brave heart," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Boy with Kiowa spirit, you are welcome here. You will be safe until the danger passes." The relief was so sudden, so overwhelming, that Sarah felt her knees weaken. "Thank you," she breathed. That night they were given a place in Singing Bird's teepee. The old woman, who had seemed so hostile just hours before, now treated them with a quiet dignity. She gave them buffalo robes and a meal of dried meat and corn cakes. No words passed between them, but none were needed. Later, with Benjamin sleeping soundly, Sarah sat by the teepee entrance. The camp was alive with the soft sounds of the evening. Running Wolf came and sat beside her. The silence between them was comfortable, easy. "They will come back to the cabin tonight," he said, his voice low. "They will find it empty. They will be angry. They will burn it." Sarah gasped. "How do you know?" "I sent scouts. They saw a fire on the horizon where your home used to be." Tears she hadn't known were there began to fall. The small home, her last connection to Thomas, was gone, erased. All their hopes turned to ash. "Benjamin's father," Running Wolf said carefully, not as a question, but as a statement. "Swift Arrow, I knew of him." Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath. "I was taken in a raid, years ago. Swift Arrow. He was different. He was kind. He protected me." She paused, the memories painful. "When Benjamin was born, he saw him as a bridge, a hope for peace." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then he was killed, and I was returned to my people." "But your people did not want you," Running Wolf guessed. She shook her head. "They saw a woman tainted by the wild, and they saw a half-Indian child. Thomas was the only one who saw just a boy, a son." Suddenly, the quiet of the camp was shattered. 2 warriors rode in at a gallop, shouting urgently. Running Wolf was on his feet in an instant. "Stay here," he commanded. Sarah watched as he conferred with the riders and Chief Gray Eagle. The men's faces grew hard, their expressions grim. Warriors began to move through the camp, checking weapons, preparing horses. The air grew thick with a new, sharper tension. When Running Wolf returned, his face was a mask of stone. "Jackson's men reached the fort. They told the army a story." He looked at her, his eyes dark. "They said a Comanche war party raided your cabin. They said we stole a white woman and her child." "That's a lie!" Sarah cried. "The army doesn't know that," he said grimly. "They believe Jackson. They are riding at dawn, to find you, to rescue you." A cold dread seized her. "What happens when they find me here?" "They will see their story confirmed," he said. "They will take you. and they may attack my people for what they believe we have done. But I can tell them the truth. I came willingly." He shook his head, a slow, sad gesture. "A man like Jackson can twist any truth. He will say we forced you to lie, or that the savage life has driven you mad." Sarah knew he was right. In their world, her story was unbelievable. Her past with Swift Arrow would make her an outcast, a traitor to her race. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice filled with a desperate plea. Running Wolf was silent for a long time, staring into the fire. "There is a place," he said finally. "A sacred canyon, 3 days' ride from here. It is hidden. A place our people go when the soldiers come." "You want us to hide?" He hesitated. Then his gaze softened as he looked towards the sleeping form of her son. Benjamin would be safe there. For a time. Sarah looked at her son, this child of two worlds, caught in a war he couldn't understand. She had spent his entire life trying to protect him. It seemed she would have to keep running. "When do we leave?" "Before the sun rises." As she lay in the darkness of the teepee, listening to the sounds of the warriors preparing for a battle that shouldn't be fought, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She was terrified. But for the first time, her son was in a place where one half of his blood was not seen as a stain. Here, they saw a warrior's spirit in his eyes. She brushed the hair from Benjamin's forehead. "I will keep you safe," she whispered into the dark, "no matter what it costs." But as they prepared to ride out into the pre-dawn chill, a young warrior, one known for his jealousy of Running Wolf, watched them from the shadows. His name was Stonehand, and he believed Running Wolf's actions had brought a curse upon them all. He saw the white woman not as a guest, but as a poison. And as their small party disappeared into the darkness, Stonehand made a decision. He would not let this trespass stand. He would send his own message to the white soldiers, a message of truth as he saw it, a message that would lead them straight to the runaways. The betrayal had already happened. They were riding not just from the army, but from a phantom that was already one step ahead. The journey was a crucible, 3 days of punishing sun and unforgiving terrain. They rode through scrubland and rocky arroyos, avoiding the open plains where an army patrol could spot them from miles away. Benjamin, showing a resilience that amazed Sarah, rode with Running Wolf, his face a mixture of awe and excitement. He was not a captive being dragged into the wilderness. He was a boy on the greatest adventure of his life. Singing Bird rode with them, her presence a silent, steady comfort. She and Sarah still had no shared words, but a language of gestures and shared tasks had grown between them. The old woman taught Sarah how to find water, how to make a poultice for saddle sores from chewed yucca root. At night, by a small, smokeless fire, she would tell stories in the Comanche way, her hands dancing in the firelight, painting pictures of coyote and eagle, of the first people who came from the stars. "She tells the story of the Star Child," Running Wolf translated one night, his voice low. "A child born of two worlds, who was destined to heal a rift between the sky and the earth." He looked at Benjamin, who was watching his mother, mesmerized. "She says Benjamin reminds her of this child." Sarah watched her son, a pang of sadness in her heart. "He knows nothing of his father's people. Swift Arrow died before he could teach him." "Kiowa and Comanche ways are different, but their roots are in the same earth," Running Wolf said. "It is good for a boy to know all the parts of himself." On the third day, the landscape changed. They entered a narrow crack in a sheer rock wall, a passage so tight they had to lead the horses in single file. The path twisted and turned, then suddenly opened up into a breathtaking sight, a hidden valley, lush and green, cradled by towering red stone cliffs. A clear stream cut through its center, and a handful of teepees were already pitched near the water. The sacred canyon. It felt like another world. The constant tension of the open plains dissolved in the peaceful air of the canyon. There was a sense of safety here, an embrace in the ancient stone walls. "Some of our families came here to escape the coughing sickness that swept the main camp last moon," Running Wolf explained. "It is a place of healing." As they made their camp, Sarah felt herself breathing freely for the first time in months. The days that followed fell into a natural rhythm. Sarah learned from the other women, her skill with a needle earning her nods of respect. Benjamin, for his part, was in paradise. He was adopted by a wild pack of older boys who taught him how to track rabbits and catch fish in the stream with his bare hands. He was no longer the strange, half-breed boy. Here, he was just Benjamin. One evening, Running Wolf found Sarah sitting on a ledge overlooking the valley, watching her son play below. "He is happy here," Running Wolf stated, not asking. "I've never seen him like this," Sarah admitted. "So whole." She looked at the warrior beside her, his profile carved by the setting sun. "What will happen to us, Running Wolf? We can't hide in this canyon forever." He was silent for a long time. "Chief Gray Eagle will send word when it is safe. Or—" he hesitated. "Some choose to stay, to live apart from the conflict." Could she do that? Abandon her world completely? And what would that mean for Benjamin? "I don't know," she said honestly. Their conversation was cut short by a shout from below. Benjamin was scrambling up the rocks toward them, his face beaming, his small hand clutching something. "Mama! Running Wolf! Look!" He opened his fist. Lying on his palm was a perfect arrowhead, chipped from a beautiful red stone, the color of the canyon walls. Running Wolf took it gently, his expression one of reverence. "This is old," he said. "Made by the ancient ones who lived here long before my people came. It is a great find, Benjamin." "Can I keep it?" the boy asked, his eyes wide. "It found you," Running Wolf said, placing it back in the boy's hand. "The old ways say that when a sacred thing chooses you, it brings powerful medicine." "What kind of medicine?" Running Wolf smiled. "A rare and gentle thing. The medicine of belonging. This land has claimed you as its own." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She watched Benjamin sleeping, the red arrowhead clutched in his hand. Everything was changing. Her fear for his future was slowly being replaced by a fierce pride in his heritage. Swift Arrow would have wanted this. He would have wanted his son to be claimed by the land. Her thoughts were shattered by urgent voices from the edge of their small camp. A lone warrior had just ridden in, his horse lathered in sweat. He had come from the main camp. He had come with news. Sarah slipped out of the teepee. Running Wolf was already there, his face grim as he listened to the rider. Dread, cold and heavy, settled in Sarah's stomach. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a strained whisper. Running Wolf turned to her, his eyes dark with a terrible knowledge. "The scout from the main camp followed the army patrol. They are not searching randomly anymore." He took a breath. "They are riding directly for this canyon." Sarah's blood ran cold. "But how? How could they know? This place is secret." The rider spoke again, his voice low and angry. Running Wolf translated, his own voice tight with fury. "Someone told them. A warrior from our own camp. Stone Hand. He sent a message to the soldiers, telling them exactly where we would be." The sanctuary was a trap. The place of healing had become a cage. They were cornered, with an army riding down on them, led there by a betrayal from within. And as the first light of dawn threatened to break over the canyon rim, they could hear the distant, unmistakable sound of a military bugle. They had run out of time. Panic erupted in the small, hidden camp. Families scattered, grabbing what they could, their peaceful sanctuary shattered. "There is another way out," Running Wolf said, his voice cutting through the fear. "An ancient path, high on the cliffs. It is dangerous, but it leads to the valley beyond. From there, we can reach the trading post at Riverbend. The man there, McAllister, he is a fair man. The army trusts him. He can speak for us." It was a desperate gamble. A 2-day ride through treacherous mountains, with the army now so close they could smell their cook fires. But it was the only chance they had. "We leave now," Sarah said, her own voice steady despite the terror coiling in her gut. Running Wolf nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He gathered his mother and 2 young warriors. Singing Bird insisted on coming, speaking forcefully to her son. "My mother has had a vision," Running Wolf translated grimly. "She says she must be with the boy. She says the hawk will fall before the river is found." It was a chilling prophecy, one they had no time to decipher. The ancient path was a nightmare. A narrow ledge clinging to the cliff face, with a 1,000-foot drop into the canyon below. Sarah held Benjamin tight, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on the back of Running Wolf, who led them with an impossible calm. They made it. By midday, they were descending into a small, hidden valley on the other side of the mountain. They paused to rest the horses, the immediate danger behind them, but the sense of being hunted still clung to them like a shroud. As they rested, Singing Bird took Benjamin aside, teaching him the Comanche names for the plants, her old hands showing him how to weave a grass charm. "She is fond of him," Sarah remarked to Running Wolf. He nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. "He reminds her of my younger brother, Little Hawk. He was lost many winters ago." He paused, his gaze distant. "The stories say he was killed in a battle with the Osage. But I was there. It was no battle. It was an ambush. By white buffalo hunters." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but Sarah could feel the ancient pain beneath the words. "My mother believes a spirit can be reborn. Not the same person, but the same essence. Little Hawk was curious, like Benjamin. He was never afraid." The shared moment was broken by a shout. One of the young warriors who had been scouting their back trail came running, his face pale. "Riders!" he gasped. "Following our path! 6 of them!" "Jackson's men," Running Wolf snarled. They hadn't waited for the army. They were hunting them personally. "We cannot outrun them here," he said, his mind racing. "We must reach the forest on the next ridge. The trees will hide our trail." They rode with a desperate urgency, pushing the horses until their sides were heaving. The sun began to set as they reached the edge of a dense pine forest. They made a cold camp, no fire, chewing on dried meat in the growing darkness. The night was filled with tension, every snap of a twig, every hoot of an owl, sounding like the approach of their pursuers. At dawn, Running Wolf returned from scouting, his face grim. "They are camped in the valley below. They know we are heading for the trading post. They are trying to cut us off." They had been traveling for less than an hour, crossing a steep, shale-covered slope, when it happened. Singing Bird's horse lost its footing. The animal screamed as it went down. The old woman was thrown clear, tumbling down the rocky incline with a cry of sharp, agonizing pain. Running Wolf was at her side in a heartbeat. He gently examined her leg, his face tightening into a mask of grief. "It is broken," he said, the words like stones. "She cannot ride." Despair hit Sarah like a physical blow. They were trapped. They couldn't leave her. But if they stayed, Jackson's men would find them within the hour. Singing Bird, her face pale but her eyes clear and resolute, spoke firmly to her son. She gestured to Sarah, to Benjamin, then pointed towards the west, towards the trading post. Her meaning was unmistakable. "What is she saying?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with tears. "She says her vision is complete," Running Wolf said, his own voice choked with emotion. "The hawk has fallen. She says we must go on, that Benjamin is the future. She is ordering the young warriors to stay with her, to make a stand, to buy us time." "No, we can't," Sarah began. "It is my mother's choice," Running Wolf said, his voice regaining its warrior's edge. "It is her honor. We will not waste her sacrifice." After a farewell that tore Sarah's heart in two, they rode on. Just the 3 of them. Sarah, Running Wolf, and the boy who carried the hopes of a dying woman on his small shoulders. The mountains became their enemy, the terrain growing steeper, more dangerous. By afternoon, the sky turned a bruised purple. A storm was coming. "We need shelter," Running Wolf grunted, scanning the jagged peaks. And then they saw it. A small, dilapidated cabin, tucked against the mountainside. A trapper's shelter, long abandoned. It was a miracle. They stumbled inside just as the heavens opened up. Rain lashed the small cabin, and thunder cracked like the sky was splitting apart. Benjamin, exhausted beyond measure, fell asleep almost instantly on a pile of old pine boughs. Sarah sank onto a crude stool, the events of the day finally crashing down on her. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words inadequate. I'm sorry for all this trouble. Running Wolf shook his head. The trouble is not from you. It is from the world of men like Jackson. He stood by the single window, watching the storm. Why did you really help us? Sarah asked suddenly, needing to understand. Back at the cabin. It wasn't just because Benjamin has native blood, was it? He was silent for a long time, the only sounds the drumming rain and the boy's soft breathing. When I was a boy, he began, his voice barely a whisper, my brother Little Hawk was killed. By buffalo hunters. He turned from the window, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light. Years later, I heard the story of a great Kiowa warrior, Swift Arrow, killed in a skirmish, by the same group of hunters. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. When I saw your son, Running Wolf continued, I did not just see a Kiowa boy. I saw the son of a man who shared my family's pain. I saw a debt that needed to be paid. I saw a chance to protect a child in a way my own brother was not protected. The confession hung in the air between them, a fragile and powerful thing, a bond forged in shared tragedy. The moment was shattered by a new sound, cutting through the roar of the storm. Hoofbeats. They were close, and they were approaching the cabin. Running Wolf moved to the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass. 3 riders! He hissed, his hand already on his knife. Coming this way. Sarah scooped the sleeping Benjamin into her arms. It had to be Jackson's men. They had been tracked. Their sanctuary was another trap. The abandoned cabin was about to become a tomb. Running Wolf flattened himself against the wall beside the door, his knife held low. The hoofbeats stopped right outside. Heavy footsteps squelched in the mud. Voices, muffled by the storm, then a heavy fist pounding on the wooden door. Hello, the cabin? A voice yelled in clear English. Anyone in there? Caught in this blasted storm? The voice wasn't one of Jackson's men, but it could be a trick. Who are you? Running Wolf called back, his voice a low growl. There was a pause, then the voice replied. Name's McAllister. From the trading post down at Riverbend, just looking for a dry place to wait out this thunder. McAllister. The man they had been risking everything to find. He was right outside the door. It was too perfect, too easy. It had to be a lie. Running Wolf held a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. They waited, their hearts pounding in time with the thunder. If it was a trick, the men outside would get impatient. They would try to break down the door. After a long minute, the voice called out again, closer to the door this time, as if the man were peering through a crack. Look, I don't mean any harm. I'm traveling with my 2 hands, and we're soaked to the bone. I've got a bottle of whiskey that says we can all be friends till morning. Sarah looked at Running Wolf, her eyes wide with a desperate hope. Could it be true? Running Wolf made a decision. He couldn't risk a fight with Benjamin inside. He took a deep breath. Open the door slowly, he whispered to Sarah. Stay behind me. He unlocked the crude wooden bar. The door swung inward with a loud creak. Standing on the threshold was a big man with a thick gray beard and rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He was flanked by 2 younger men who looked to be of mixed heritage. His shrewd eyes took in the scene in an instant. The Comanche warrior poised with a knife, the frightened woman clutching a child. He didn't look surprised. He looked weary. Well now, he grumbled, stepping inside and shaking the water from his coat. Looks like you folks are in a whole heap of trouble. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling. Mr. McAllister, we were trying to reach you. My name is Sarah Sullivan. Recognition flared in the trader's eyes. Sullivan? The widow from Cottonwood Creek? Good Lord, woman, the whole army is out looking for you. They're saying you and the boy were taken by a Comanche war party. It's a lie, Sarah said, the words tumbling out of her. A man named Jackson tried to run us off our land. Running Wolf saved us. We went to his people for protection. McAllister's gaze shifted to Running Wolf, then back to Sarah. He seemed to weigh her words, his eyes missing nothing. Jackson, you say? He let out a long, slow whistle. That explains a few things. That man's greed is as wide as Texas. He's been gobbling up land using every dirty trick in the book. He settled his large frame onto a bench. You'd better tell me everything from the beginning." As the storm raged outside, they told him their story. The attack, the flight to the Comanche camp, the betrayal by Stone Hand, the chase through the mountains, Singing Bird's sacrifice. McAllister listened without interruption, his expression growing more and more grim. When they finished, he was silent for a long moment, stroking his gray beard. "I believe you," he said finally. "Every word." He looked at Running Wolf. "I've known Chief Gray Eagle for 20 years. He's a man of his word. He wouldn't sanction a raid on a widow's cabin." He then turned his piercing gaze on Sarah. "And I can see you're no captive, ma'am. You're a survivor." A wave of relief so profound it was dizzying washed over Sarah. "But we have a problem," McAllister continued. "Jackson has the ear of the new captain at Fort Richardson. Captain Wilson is young, straight from the east. He doesn't know the way of things out here. Right now, all he knows is Jackson's story." "So, what do we do?" Sarah asked. "It's our word against his." "We need more than words," McAllister said. "We need proof." Sarah's heart sank. "There is no proof. He burned my cabin to the ground." Running Wolf, who had been silent throughout the conversation, suddenly spoke. "There is proof." All eyes turned to him. He reached into a small leather pouch at his belt. His fingers retrieved something and held it out. It was a silver belt buckle, ornate and unusual, with the initial J carved into it. "One of the men I fought at the cabin," Running Wolf said. "He dropped this as he fell. I took it." McAllister leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Let me see that." He examined the buckle closely. "I know this buckle. It belongs to a man named Hobbs. He's Jackson's right-hand man. This places him at your cabin. This proves Jackson's story of a Comanche raid is a lie." It was the key, the one piece of evidence that could unravel everything. "Here's the plan," McAllister said, his voice now filled with a new energy. "At first light, we ride for Fort Richardson. All of us. We're going to walk right into the lion's den. I'll get us a meeting with Captain Wilson. You," he said to Sarah, "will tell your story. And you," he said to Running Wolf, "will give him the proof." The journey to the fort was thick with tension. McAllister's presence guaranteed them safe passage, but they were met with stares of cold hostility from the soldiers on patrol. To them, Running Wolf was a savage. Sarah was his victim, and Benjamin was a stolen child. The fort was a bustling, orderly place that felt a world away from the canyons and prairies they had just crossed. Captain Wilson was a young man with a stiff uniform and an even stiffer posture. And sitting in the captain's office, looking comfortable and confident, was the man himself, Jackson. He was a large man, dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place on the frontier. He had a politician's smile and a predator's eyes. When he saw them enter, his smile widened, but his eyes went cold. "Captain Wilson!" he boomed, standing up. "Thank heavens! You've found her. Mrs. Sullivan, you are safe now. These savages will harm you no more." Sarah flinched at the hypocrisy, but before she could speak, McAllister stepped forward. "That's enough, Jackson. Captain, there's another side to this story. A truer one." For the next hour, they laid out their case. Sarah spoke with a quiet, powerful dignity, her voice never wavering as she described the attack. Jackson scoffed and interrupted, painting her as a hysterical woman, driven mad by grief and captivity. "It's a fantasy, Captain. The poor woman doesn't know what she's saying. The Comanche have twisted her mind." Captain Wilson was clearly conflicted. He looked from Sarah's earnest face to Jackson's confident smirk. "Mrs. Sullivan, it is a terrible story. But Mr. Jackson is a respected citizen, and you admit you were living in the Comanche camp." "By choice," Sarah insisted. "It is my word against theirs," Jackson said smoothly. "And frankly, Captain, the word of a Comanche warrior." He let the sentence hang in the air, the prejudice thick and ugly. It wasn't working. They were losing. Sarah could see the doubt hardening in the captain's eyes. He was going to side with Jackson. "There is more," Running Wolf said, his voice cutting through the tension. He stepped forward and placed the silver buckle on the captain's desk. Jackson's face went white. He stared at the buckle as if it were a coiled rattlesnake. "I recognize that buckle," McAllister said calmly. It belongs to your man, Hobbs. What was he doing at Mrs. Sullivan's cabin, Jackson? The trap was sprung. Jackson was cornered, his lies crumbling around him. He sputtered, trying to come up with an explanation, but there was none. The confidence evaporated from his face, replaced by the raw panic of a trapped animal. Captain Wilson picked up the buckle, his eyes hard as he looked at Jackson. "I think," he said slowly, "you have some explaining to do, Mr. Jackson." And that's when everything broke. Jackson didn't try to talk his way out of it. He exploded. With a roar of rage, he lunged across the desk, not for the captain, but for Sarah. He grabbed her, pulling her in front of him as a shield, a pistol appearing in his hand as if by magic. "Nobody moves!" he screamed, his voice shrill with panic. "I'm walking out of here!" The soldiers in the room froze, but Running Wolf did not. He moved with the same impossible speed he had shown at the cabin. He wasn't a man. He was a force of nature. Before Jackson could even register the movement, Running Wolf had crossed the room. There was a blur of motion, a sharp crack as his hand struck Jackson's wrist. The pistol clattered to the floor. In the same fluid movement, he spun Jackson around and slammed him face first into the wall. The fight was over. Silence descended on the room. Jackson, groaning, was hauled to his feet by two soldiers, his face a mask of shocked defeat. Captain Wilson stared at Running Wolf, a new understanding, a newfound respect, dawning in his eyes. He turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, his voice filled with genuine remorse, "I apologize. It seems I have been a fool." The aftermath was swift. Jackson and his men were arrested. An army patrol was dispatched to find Singing Bird and the two young warriors, who were found alive, having successfully held off Jackson's men in a fierce skirmish. With McAllister's testimony and the evidence of the buckle, Jackson's entire land-grabbing empire came crashing down. Justice, for once on the frontier, was absolute. Weeks later, Sarah and Benjamin stood on a small piece of land near McAllister's trading post. It was their new home. A fresh start. Running Wolf and a healed Singing Bird had ridden over from the Comanche camp to see them settled. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery colors, Running Wolf stood with Sarah, watching Benjamin chase butterflies in a field of wildflowers. "Singing Bird was right," Sarah said softly. "He is a bridge between worlds." Running Wolf nodded. "The old ones say a child like him carries a special purpose. They see with two sets of eyes. They understand with two hearts." He looked at her, his gaze direct and honest. "He will need teachers from both worlds." It was a promise of friendship, a promise that Benjamin would never have to choose one half of himself over the other. Benjamin ran back to them, his face flushed with happiness. "Mama," he said, "are we home now?" Sarah looked from her son's bright, hopeful face to the strong, silent warrior beside her. She looked out at the horizon, where the prairie met the mountains, where two worlds touched. "Yes, Benjamin," she said, her heart full. "We are finally home." The journey had been one of fire and fear, of loss and betrayal. But it had led them here, to a place of peace. A place where a family, born not of one blood, but of shared courage, could finally begin to grow. And in the quiet strength of a Comanche warrior, the fierce love of a mother, and the boundless spirit of a boy with two worlds in his eyes, there was a hope that was stronger than any hatred, as vast and enduring as the Texas sky itself. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the wild frontier. Thank you for watching.